Today I'll be using these aluminum rods to build a body lift for the budget crawler. Now there are body lifts available on the market, obviously there are plenty of them, but since we're on a budget, I'm going to build my own.
Alright, so what we're starting with here are two 8-inch by 2.5-inch diameter aluminum rods. They're both look exactly like this, they're identical. I bought them off of eBay. They were both of them, I think, for like 40 bucks shipped to my door. So pretty good deal. And this is what we're going to base the whole body lift off of. Now I'm going to go for 1.25 inch body lift height. I think that 1 inch is pretty good. A little hair more than that, 1.25, I think is the optimal height for a body lift on a TJ. In my opinion, anything more than that is just excessive and I don't like the look of it. So we're going to go with the 1.25 on this. Now there are a plethora of options if you do a little search on the internet for body lifts available for Jeeps. The majority of those are going to be polyurethane or some kind of plastic based material, which I'm not a big fan of because those body lift spacers will compress over time and will lose height on the lift. So if we have tight clearances on parts, those clearances will get tighter and tighter as the pucks start to sag and compress. So I think that aluminum is really the way to go here. Now the first thing we're going to do here is use the bandsaw with a metal cutting blade to go ahead and cut these into just over 1.25 inch pucks. I left a little bit of wiggle room in there that we can take off later, so we went ahead and ended up with 12 pucks out of the height of all these rods. And then from there we went ahead and refined the height on the belt sander. This is just a 4-inch wide belt sander. If I didn't have this standalone unit, I probably would have just chucked up a handheld one in the vise, which probably isn't the best idea, but it gets the job done. So we ended up getting refined down to right at 1.25 inches, or at least within a few thousandths of an inch of each other. We got them real close on the belt sander here, close enough for what we need. And then from there, we were kind of left with some sharp edges on them, so I went ahead and used the poor man's lathe. Basically just drilled a hole in the middle of the puck, which we were going to need to get to eventually anyways. Then put a bolt through that hole, and chucked that bolt into the drill press to spin the puck around in circles. So then I grabbed a little bit of emery cloth and ran that along the corners of the puck, which rounded off the corners a little bit, just kind of made it a little nicer, easier to handle, and really gave it a nice look. And while I was at it, I went ahead and just used the emery cloth on the sides of the puck as well to give them a nice little kind of brushed look almost. There were a few of these that required a little bit of a bevel, which I'll get into in a few minutes here. But for those ones, I just used the same method, the puck chucked up inside the drill press, and went ahead and grabbed my angle grinder with a flap disc on it, and went to town, put a little bevel on them. So as you can see here, even if you don't have the right tools, you can usually get the job done. So let's go ahead and take a look at the final product. So here's the final product. Now, I had initially thought about painting these just a nice flat black so they blend in with the underside well. However, I really like the look of bare aluminum, so rather than paint them black, I went and sprayed them with some adhesion promoter and then threw a few coats of matte clear on them. So as of now, they'll be looking like this. We'll see. I may change my mind once they're in place and decide to paint them black anyway if they stand out too badly, but I think they're pretty good looking like this. So as it stands, we've got basically 3 different types of pucks here. So I'll run through. These are basically the order that they're going to be laid out when they're installed on the Jeep. So we have one that's going to go underneath the center of the grill right here. Then we have 1, 2, 3 right across here. Then I'm going to go underneath basically the driver and passenger seats on the frame. And then we have another 2 that go above the axle, and then 2 more that go right at the rear corners of the body. So in terms of the 3 types, the first type we have is the 4 in the rear here and the 1 under the grill. These can all be used interchangeably, and basically they're just the 2.5 inch diameter puck cut at 1.25 inch. And then like I said, I rounded the edges a little bit just to make them a little nicer. Now these ones in the rear use a smaller bolt than the remaining 6 on here, so that's why these are all the same. And then group number 2. We have exactly the same as these ones in the rear here, except they have a larger bolt hole. And then group number 3, we've got exactly the same as these ones, except the edges are beveled. So this is where I ended up using the angle grinder with the flap disc because in order for these to go up and mount right flush against the body, they need a little bit of a bevel here because the spot where they touch is a little bit recessed. And I only did these from memory. I didn't even actually look under the Jeep before I made these things. So as far as I remember, we only need 4 that are like this. I will update if anything changes, but as far as I know, that's all we need. Now hopefully this is pretty clear so far. It really wasn't too difficult. It was just really time consuming. Like I've probably got maybe, I don't know, 10 or 11 hours into this already between all the sanding. I had to do a lot of sanding. The sanding took the longest. That was probably 4 or 5 hours alone right there, just getting these things refined right down to where I needed them to be. I kind of had some issues in the beginning with dull blades, and it was just basically ended up being a pain in the butt. So, yeah, would I recommend doing this? Absolutely not. Go out and buy a set. However, I think they came out really well. I'm very happy with the way they look. So now we just need to go ahead and install them. Hopefully there won't be any issues there. I don't think there will be. The Jeep's not too rusty. I've installed body lifts on Jeeps that were far rustier than this one. I went ahead and picked up some longer bolts already. I just went down to Tractor Supply. That's the cheapest place where I live, where you can buy, decent quality bolts, good enough quality bolts. Basically buying by the pound there. So it ended up being like $10 or so for the bolts, and it probably would have been, maybe $30 or so if I had bought them individually at the hardware store. A little bit of advice: never buy bolts at Home Depot or Lowe's. Those are going to be the worst priced bolts you will probably ever find. A little rule of thumb is if you're buying a bolt and it comes in a plastic bag, you're definitely paying too much. So Tractor Supply, like I said, is where I like to go to get reasonably priced bolts. Now let's get to the install. I've installed and uninstalled quite a few body lifts in my day, and I think my current record for install is just south of 20 minutes. We're not going to be going anywhere near that right now because I got to deal with the camera, but it should be a pretty quick process, so let's get to work. Now this is not an instructional video, at least I'm not intending it to be. And I'm just going to show you the way that I like to install these. I don't necessarily advise that you do it the same way, If you choose to repeat, do so at your own risk, but this is the way I like to get this done. We'll start by popping out the bolt on the front body mount under the grill here. Nice impact makes a huge difference. This one's getting pretty outdated at this point. It's relatively weak compared to most of the stuff that's out now. It's probably at least 15 years old or so. I think I traded a lawn tractor for it actually maybe 10 years ago. And one of the best investments I've made. Now the next thing I do really isn't necessary, but where I live in a rusty place, it helps a lot with this. And what we're going to do is disconnect the steering shaft from the frame. There are 2 bolts. There's one right there, and then there's one on the side over here that will access from the wheel well. Now this probably wouldn't really need to be done if I live somewhere without road salt, because there's a collapsible joint on the steering shaft that would adjust itself as the body raises and lowers, like you'll see happen shortly here. But where I live, a lot of time those joints rust up a little bit and makes it a pain to get them back together if they spread apart too much when we lift the body. So I generally choose to disconnect that so that the whole thing can raise, and then we'll get it back into place after the body lift's installed. So I'm just going to go ahead and zip those out right now. That hasn't moved in a while. And something important to note here is that these do have a blue thread locker from the factory, so we'll make sure to put some of that back on when we put these back in. With the steering shaft disconnected from the frame, the only thing we have left to do under the hood is to either loosen or remove the radiator fan shroud, because we'll be jacking up the body, which the fan shroud is connected to, but the fan on the engine, which is inside the fan shroud, will be staying in the same spot with the frame. So the solutions to this are either generally going to be install a motor mount lift when you install the body lift, which brings the engine up, and that also brings the fan up so that the fan shroud can stay in the same spot, or the fan shroud can be lowered and just drill new mounting holes in the fan shroud, which is probably the option I would go with, but there is a third option, which we'll talk more about later. So right now for me, I'm just going to totally remove the fan shroud. If I wasn't going with option number 3, which you'll learn about later, then I would probably just leave it floating in here and fish a drill in here to drill new holes and deal with it that way. But let's go ahead and get this out. Alright, so we've got the shroud and the fan removed. I pulled them out both together. Like I said, I've got some plans for this. That will be in a future episode, but we're just going to leave off right here for now. In most cases, we just re-drill the holes in the shroud and be done with it, but I seem to take things a little further than I should sometimes. So. Now with that steering shaft out of the way, we're going to go ahead and run along one side of the Jeep. So I'm gonna be lifting the passenger side first. So right now we're on the driver's side, and I'm just gonna loosen all the bolts on this side. Just gonna, back them out a few threads. We don't want to pull them out totally. We just want to loosen them up so that we can tilt the body, and we won't be bending the bolts or the mounts on here when we lift the other side to put the pucks in. So just gonna run down and do that. We got 1, 2, 3. Another one right, almost directly above the rear axle. And then the 5th one right on the back corner of the Jeep. Now on the other side, since this is where we're installing the lift first, we're just going to completely remove the bolts. Well, that's not good. Let's try a little more power. Trusty old Big Bertha. Yeah, I had a little more crust on it than the other ones have so far. Nowhere near as bad as most other Jeeps in this part of the country, but so it sure takes its toll. Alright, so driver's side bolts loosened, check. Steering shaft bolts removed, check. Front grille bolt removed, check. And all the bolts on this side removed, check. So now this is where my method can get a little sketchy. Like I said, this is the way I do it. I'm not saying that anyone else should do it this way, but this is how I do it. This has worked for me in the past, and that's how I'm going to do it today. So a little note before I start. Once I start lifting the body, no way, no how am I going to put any part of my body in between the Jeep body and the frame or anywhere that it could get pinched. So I'm always keeping that in mind. And yeah, here we go. So you can see I've got the jack set up already here and a nice hefty block of wood that I'm going to use as a buffer between the jack and the Jeep body so I don't ding up the Jeep body. Obviously there is a risk involved in this where the wood could kick out or who knows, it could split, I don't know. But like I said, I'm just going to do it as safely as I can, and this is the best way that I have figured out to do it with the tools that I have. I'm always keeping an eye on this block of wood to make sure it's going straight up and down. I don't want it to start tilting and kick out. You can see we're getting a little bit of separation here now. I'm probably going to go about 2 inches between the body and the body mounts, so we have plenty of room to slide the new spacers in. And I think that should be plenty enough space now, so we'll go ahead and throw our new spacers in. We'll put the 5N on this side, drop the body down, then we'll move on to the other side and do the same over there. I'll just go along to each of the spots where the body lift mounts are before I put the puck in there and clean off the dirt with this little plastic brush here so that we're not grinding dirt right into the paint when we lower down onto the puck. Like I said, I'm not putting my hands anywhere in here, just a brush. And as I go, I'll just start throwing the bolts in if I can so that we keep the body aligned with the frame properly. Obviously I don't have the bottom of the puck on here right now. Like I said, I'm just putting this in so that we keep the body aligned side to side. And right here you can see why we needed to make 4 of those beveled pucks. So there's 2 on this side, so this little concave area here, right here, another one right back here. These are both right under the door, and it's the same thing on both sides. So this one, and then the same on the other side. And all the rest of them just kind of lie up against flat sheet metal like this right here. So we've got the nice bevel there that'll tie in nicely with the body. And just more of the same as we keep moving back. So I won't bore you with that. One thing I will say is I will do the puck right above the body last, because that's the one where I will be in the most compromising position, I would say. So I'll do these 3 right here, another one on the back corner, then I'll climb underneath and just slide the other puck in, then we'll put the body down and get to the other side. I'm starting to run into a little issue right now where I can't slide the spacer for the frame right above the axle. I've got every other one on this side so far, but that one is just a little tighter. Now I'm fully maxed out on the jack here. I could let this down and put a bigger block in or do something else, but I'm just going to try to let a little air out of the tire because I don't need too much room, just a little more. So with all the pucks in place on this side and that tire re-inflated, go ahead and let the body down slowly back onto these. I'll keep an eye on them as we're letting the body down, make sure they seem like they're centered and where they need to be. And whether it will do anything in the case of flying wood or not, I am wearing a face shield. So what I'm going to do now is just go ahead and put these bottom little pieces on with the bolt. And as I put them on, I'm just going to leave them a few threads loose, just like we did on the other side, because we'll have to pivot the other side up in order to get the spacers on there. Alright, now we're moving on to the driver's side. It's going to be pretty much exactly the same as the other side. The only difference here is that before I jack this up, I'm going to remove these 4 bolts inside the filler neck right here and let the filler neck float free while we're raising the body up and down, because there's a high risk of cracking this plastic bezel if we don't do that. So I'll do that, and then once the body lift's installed, I'll pull the filler neck up to here and put these bolts back in. And it's free to move in and out and up and down, whatever it needs to do. Like I said, I'm just going to leave this like this for now. I guess we could put something over the cap for now if we want it. I don't want to put the regular cap back on, because if this does end up needing to poke through here, the cap will stop it from going too far, and in turn we'll end up cracking this. If we really wanted to, we could pull these bolts off as well, and that would give us room to put the cap back on, but I'm not going to bother, because we have a little flap door in there that really helps prevent, number 1, anything from falling in, and number 2, vapors from coming out. And like I said, just more of the same over here. And here you can see exactly why we let that fuel filler go. It popped right in there, and we'll get back to it later. So I'm going to go ahead and throw all the pucks on here, and we'll be right back with you. And that pretty much wraps this up. I didn't film a whole lot of the stuff towards the end. I figured the video was getting pretty long as is, and all of it was just reassembly, so opposite of how we took it apart. We got all the bolts tightened up on the body mounts. I'll probably recheck the torque on them, make sure they're still tight after driving for a little while, because those I have experienced after installing a body lift tend to loosen up over time, so we'll definitely go back and check all those. We got the fuel filler neck reattached. We got the steering shaft re-bolted onto the frame using thread lock on the bolts there. And the cooling fan, like I said, we're going to leave that as is for now, so there's no cooling fan or shroud in here. Obviously not going to drive it, but we're going to pick up with that on the next video, I think, and we'll show you what I'm going to do about that. So this is the final product. Huge difference, right? I mean, I notice a little bit of a difference above the front tires, just a little more clearance there. But if I didn't tell you I installed this, you probably wouldn't know. And the beauty of this modification will become apparent as time goes on. We're going to be able to tuck some stuff up real tight underneath the body, and we're going to gain some clearance that way, along with a little bit of tire clearance that we picked up as well. So we'll just cut to a few exterior shots here, showing the final product in the actual daylight instead of in front of this seemingly insanely bright light that's pointed at my face. So would I recommend a small body lift like this to your average Jeep owner? Yeah, sure. I'd stick to 1¼ inch maximum. That's my preference. Any more than that, I think, is excessive and starts to bite into some of the things that people have really negative opinions on body lifts about. I'm not going to discuss that here. You can go do some research online if you want to read more about that. But I would stick to 1¼ inch maximum. It'll give you a little more tire clearance, keeping your center of gravity, your frame, your fuel tank, your engine a little lower. So it'll be a little more stable. That's the base benefit there. But like I said, I'm going to be doing some more modifications later down the line where this body lift will be critical.
And as usual, I'll go ahead and talk about the cost of this episode. If you're just joining us, this is a budget build, and my goal is to keep this under $5,000 total to get this thing capable out in the rocks. So our previous total from last time was $1,689.65. And the aluminum rods that I used were $39.99. I bought those off of eBay. That was the price shipped to my door for both of those rods. The bolts that I got for the extended body mounts were $10.74 down at Tractor Supply. The coating that I put on these, which was the adhesion promoter, which is just basically a clear primer, essentially, and then clear coat. Those are just a couple cans I had left over from a previous project, so I'll say I used maybe $4 worth of both of those total, give or take. And then I ended up going through one sanding belt on the belt sander when I was doing this, and the replacement belt ended up costing $13.79 down at the hardware store. And that brings our total for the day to $68.52. Now, is this a cheap body lift? Relatively, I guess. We could compare this to an aluminum body lift made by Savvy Off-Road. If I hadn't built my own, I would have definitely gone with the Savvy lift. I think on their website is listed at $135 plus shipping. And, maybe what's shipping? 15, 20 bucks. So we'll say it's maybe $150 total for their lift versus right around 70 for mine. So that was a savings of about 80 bucks. Was it worth it? I don't really think so, because I spent a lot of time on this, and if I were to do it again, I would probably just go with the Savvy. But it was a good experience. We got it done, and yeah, so what's our new total for the build? Our new total comes out to $1,758.17. So we're not doing too bad so far. That's really not bad, since that includes the purchase price of the Jeep. But yeah, so next time I think we'll pick up with the cooling system, like I kind of alluded to earlier in the video. So you can look forward to that, I guess. But as usual, thanks for watching. Appreciate you staying tuned. Always appreciate a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe, because there will be plenty more content on this Jeep to come. Thanks for watching.